The Scientific Entrepreneur isn't really about me. Hopefully it's about some of you, and it's about anyone who has become an entrepreneur who originally was a scientist. So this evening, just before I start talking about my journey, which I want to share with you, I want to get a sense of who you are. Thank you so much for giving up this evening to come and listen as well. It's great to see a full room. Who has just a passing curiosity about entrepreneurship? And who's got more than a passing curiosity? Who actually sees themselves one day maybe setting up a business? Okay, that's great. And who's actually tried setting up a business before? Oh wow, so we actually have some entrepreneurs in the room. That's brilliant, wonderful. Tonight I'm going to share with you what happened with me at IC and then how I eventually became an entrepreneur. It wasn't something that happened immediately. And if you've read the biog, I mean, my first big entrepreneurial venture crashed and burned quite spectacularly, which I'll go into details later. So I'll share with you, hopefully, what I learned from that experience and what everybody that was involved learned from that experience. So I was originally a physicist here, a very long time ago now, back in 1988, and then I stayed here and did a medical physics PhD. In fact, I managed to find some photos. This is my class photo from 1988, and that little square there is me looking naive and 17. A couple of other my classmates here that you might know about. I don't know if you've ever followed the trials and tribulations of Michael Birch, who set up Birthday Alarm and Bebo. Michael and I weren't friends at university. It was a very big class, 200 people, but he eventually made Bebo.com, which sold for $850 million. I think he had a 70% stake in that company with his wife, so he made a huge amount of money. Vivek and Maya Tandon I knew both separately. I actually knew Maya before I came to Imperial. We met through some random events beforehand. They ended up getting married, and I met them last year for a catch-up. We've got 3 lovely kids now, and Vivek runs Allo Private Equity, and they invest in environmental tech in Asia. So it's a fund that takes technology companies where the management isn't doing very well, but they have a brilliant technology, and they turn it around. And I think he told me their combined portfolio now has a revenue of more than $1 billion. So really, really some big success stories coming out of Imperial, and that's just from my physics class. I'm sure there will make plenty more. This is us graduating. That's me with a big Harry Potter hair. You don't see the glasses, but I did have them as well. Vivek and Maya, you can see I think they actually got married in their 3rd year. And that is Michael Birch. And I also spotted Matt Rayner, who's a friend of mine that I knew a little bit better, and I know that he started some venture a couple of years ago. I didn't track what happened to that. Who knows how many other entrepreneurial stories there were from Imperial. After Imperial, I didn't really know what to do. I joined Anderson Consulting because they offered me a job when I was an undergraduate, and I was writing up at the same time. So without doubt, those were the worst 13 months of my life. This is an actor representing me during those times. It was honestly hideous. And I then decided to leave Anderson's as soon as I possibly could. I'm not a big company person. And I set up my own company. It was my first company, but it was a tax vehicle. It was a way to get paid as a consultant in a tax-efficient way. You can't work as a self-employed person normally, so you have to do something like that. And I floated around a lot, really, until I did some personal development work. So a friend of mine from Imperial, Wendy, did a course. She got lots of good results out of it, and then Eric did a course, another friend of mine from physics. And so I decided to do it, and I set myself 4 goals. The first big one was to finish my PhD and submit it, because I was 95% written up, but stuck. I wanted to buy a house, I wanted to start a web company, and I wanted to write a book, so I had an interest in writing. And within 12 months, I'd achieved all of those things to some degree. I thought I'd written a novel, but I hadn't. It was just a long, short story. I started a web company that was a bit rubbish with Eric, and we just closed that. But we had a go. That's the important thing. And for me, personal development was the beginning of being an entrepreneur. But I continued to float a little bit and got sucked into technology training. And I delivered technology training in the city for 2 years, both in London and I got flown out to New York. And I was following the money. And I got paid an exorbitant amount of money to teach relational database technology skills to very bright people who were working in the city. And it was great fun for the first 2 years. And then after a while, it started to be the same things over and over and over again. And I realised that money didn't make me happy. And then Wendy, who was one of my best friends from Imperial, along with Eric, who's probably my closest friend from Imperial, decided to be crazy and had heard about this World Wide Web thing, which back then was still quite, a growing phenomenon. People didn't really understand it. And she told me one day she decided she wanted to, I think the word she used was make a play in that space or something. It all sounded very American to me. And she wanted to create some technology to help people share their passions online, which sounds much ruder than it is. It was about, people have passions, they want to follow those passions, and how do you get communities enabled to do that online? And she set up, she asked Eric and I to join her, and I said no. Eric said yes. And then 3 months later, they demonstrated what they were doing. And it was amazing. And I couldn't believe how Wendy's an extraordinary person. She's so ambitious and charismatic and pulls people together. And she created this phenomenal looking piece of, PR really. It was more than a working technology at that stage. And I was amazed and inspired. And it was too late for me to join them. So I ended up working for Moonfruit as a consultant. And because I was a database expert by this stage, I designed the database that still runs all of the websites that Moonfruit builds. So there are more than 6 million websites have been built using that technology and delivered. Both, again, Imperial graduates. In fact, Eric went off to Cambridge to do his PhD, and Wendy did a business degree. She did an MBA after her first degree here. So I couldn't, Moonfruit wasn't mine. It was great fun being part of that adventure and seeing what was happening. And this is before the dot-com boom and bust, the first boom and bust had happened. And I wanted to do something of my own. And I was a big fitness fanatic, but I hate cardio. And I was sitting on a life cycle bike one day in a gym. And as a physicist, sitting on a bike that doesn't go anywhere is probably the most frustrating thing you can imagine, right? You're pedaling, putting all this effort in, and it's hideous. I don't like exercise. I do it because I have to feel, I want to, the benefits of health. And I thought the real problem with this is my energy isn't going into, isn't being used anywhere. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if you could take that energy and make it power some crazy machine that spun and lights came on? And then I thought about games like Tekken or Street Fighter, and I thought, it'd be even more fun if you could put the energy somehow into two fighters and get a competitive element. That was the birth of what became Exatris. Back then, I'd set up a Moonfruit website because we were all told to as part of working there. And really, the original idea for Jim Wizard was something completely different. So at some point, I thought, I can't work as a consultant for someone else's company, even if they're my best friends, anymore. I have to do this myself. It's too exciting, and I've got this great idea that I'd mentioned to a couple of other people who were, really thought it had legs, that we could go for it. So I put together quite a compelling but very short PowerPoint presentation and went to some people that I knew that had money, that had made money independently, and within a day I had £45,000 to play with. So when you have a really great idea, people will buy into it and will be prepared to take a risk. And you have to negotiate how much of your company you're going to give away. I didn't even have a company at that stage, so I'm selling an idea. By August of that year, I'd spoken to Carl Drage, who did MEcEng here at Imperial and was a very good friend of mine. And he resigned from a very large company where he was doing very well, because he was so excited about the possibility of us making this product and bringing it to market. And we took over my dining room. I got rid of the dining table, and we sat down, three of us, and built a prototype of this product. I coded the first game, which was called, in fact, it was called Exatris. It was a mishmash of Tetris and exercise. So you had these things dropping, and if you pedalled, the harder you pedalled, you could sort of blow a wind that made them stop falling. So you were able to then position them and make things explode and clear away a game screen. And it was a scrappy prototype, but it was so compelling. So we were, by this time, really fired up. And we went out and raised a lot more money. And by 2001, I had a full R&D team. I think I had 18 staff by that stage. We raised about 1.5 million, I think, to pay for people's salaries. So when you're employing bright people, you pay for them, even if you're offering them equity. It costs a lot of money. Karen McGuigan joined us from chemical engineering. Shaq, who I didn't know but just applied for the job, was also an Imperial graduate. So we had lots of talent from Imperial coming to join the company, and we had a really high velocity. We built, from a proof of concept prototype, we built a full industrial strength gaming exercise platform in 18 months. It was incredible velocity. I mean, people at Microsoft take longer to bring out gaming consoles than we were able to build that. And we actually used Microsoft technology to help us get along the way. So the next few years were really an incredible journey for me. I was on Tomorrow's World twice, in fact. We were featured. You're probably too young to even remember Tomorrow's World. Who remembers Tomorrow's World? Who's seen Tomorrow's World then? Same people? Okay. And half the room have no idea what that is. Okay. It's so Tomorrow's World is a BBC television show that featured new technology that technically wasn't supposed to be on the market yet. We cheated a little bit because we'd actually started selling bikes a couple of weeks before, and we did a live presentation on that show. And we launched the product simultaneously. In 2003, I was nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year. I didn't win, but for Ernst & Young, I was also entered for the Tomorrow's World Innovation Awards, and I was a TV finalist for Inventor of the Year. And we all almost dropped to the floor when our PR company told us that Bill Gates was going to promote show the product at the Consumer Electronics Show, which was an incredibly amazing thing to hear. I had 36 staff, 5 of which were from IC. We'd had £5 million of investment by this stage. We had a wonderful little office in Waterloo. There was an incredible sense of creating something new and exciting. And then, in 2003, we were in crisis. We had 36 staff, most of whom were extremely smart, able people who were taking reduced salaries just to be part of something that was quite, an experience, but still were expensive to run. Huge cash burn, and we somehow built a product that cost £2,500 per unit to build. So when I first started modelling our business model for this, I think our target production price was something like under £200, and somehow we were 10 times as expensive as that. And I didn't know how we got to that point. I'll go through in a minute what mistakes we made, because it's important not to make them. And I hope if you do end up going into anything like this, that you can learn from this. Our retail price was governed by that price, and actually there was no way we were going to achieve a retail price of £5,000. That's as much as some cars. And actually, when you're thinking about what was in the bike, it had a full-on computer inside it. It was a games console and a bike with 3 patented features that were actually 2 of which were completely unnecessary. We were making, if we were lucky, £500 gross profit per unit. And at that price, we were selling 15 or 20 a month with a team of 5 salespeople. So that would pay for about 1 or 2 people's salaries. And we had 36. That's not a nice situation to be in. And there's a point as an entrepreneur when you're running a business and you have lots of investment where you go home and have cold sweats at night and you can't sleep, and you have this fear that consumes you about whether or not you're going to crash and burn. And I had probably 20 more than about 25 friends invest in this company, giving their own hard-earned money. So it wasn't a comfortable time for me. This was me making my first financial model using Excel, obviously. So what went wrong? We did 5, I really thought I knew what I was doing. I made 5 different financial scenarios, all based on estimates for the size of the fitness market that I wanted to be true. And we didn't make the smallest of those. When we actually went out and tried to sell, the addressable market isn't the same as the possible market. So the addressable market is really important to understand, and that's what I want to talk about right at the end of this talk, about how science, you guys are all trained scientists, and if I'd stopped for a minute to think about how science, all of my training could have been applied to business, hopefully I wouldn't have made some of those mistakes, and I'm not making those mistakes now. So the cost of manufacture I've been through. If you ever go into manufacturing, the cost of manufacture is a function of the number of units that you build, and that's a function of sales. So if you're building 1,000 units in a go, you can get a much lower price. But when you're building them, 10 or 15 at a time, you just can't make them cheaply. You can't buy enough quantity. We discovered that our buyers, we were selling B2B, but in my head I designed a product for you guys, or for the people using the bikes, for myself. So everything about the bike was geared around the end user. It was a shiny, gorgeous machine. It didn't need to be. Gym machines aren't pretty. They don't need to be. They need to be fun, right? So all of the things that we were designing for were wrong. And our users, actually, I think I've missed an item off there. Our buyers were either gym owners who cared about money, or the influencers were personal development, personal trainers. Now, a personal trainer's job is to motivate somebody who goes to a gym. So when you try and sell them a product that motivates users, they feel threatened. And that was a psychological element that I had no way of knowing until we went to try. I mean, we actually had people saying, what am I going to do? It's my job to sit next to someone on a life cycle. I get paid to motivate them. So all of these things were not possible to see in a crystal ball. 9/11 happened. That was an awful period to go through as well, because it was an awful thing to witness. I remember we all just stopped working and watched the Twin Towers coming down. But you know that that's going to lead to a world crisis and a recession, which when you're in the business of being an entrepreneur is terrifying, and that's exactly what happened. We made lots of early mistakes though. That needn't have been a problem for us. Those early mistakes we made as early as 2000 when we were doing those financial models. So those mistakes ended up having extremely delayed consequences, and there is a way of doing business that mitigates that. So you don't have to have your mistakes pop up, or like weeds in a field suddenly sprout a year later, or 2 years later, or 3 years later. You want those mistakes to crop up as and have an impact as early as possible. So how do you handle losing millions? Now, I lost £5 million of other people's money, lots of whom were friends, some of whom had invested. We had two individual investors who put between 500,000 and £1 million of their own money. And they did that because they believed in me and they believed in the team that we brought together. We all wanted it to work. My house was on the line. I remortgaged twice in order to fund this idea because I believed in it, and I still do believe in it. And I nearly lost my house, and I lost 100,000 of hard cash, and I lost 2.5 million of equity. But the hardest thing is losing other people's money. At the end of the day, money is something that exists in a banking computer or a cloud of computers somewhere. The hardest thing is failing your friends, or that's how it feels. So the reason there's a tap there is because when I told Hayley that I went home and turned on the tap, she thought I meant the gas tap. So I didn't turn on the gas tap. I went home, and this is thanks to the personal development that I did, and I really urge you to go out and do personal development of any kind. It doesn't matter what you do. Just find personal development courses. There are thousands out there that help you grow as a person. And my personal development helped me go home and have the attitude of gratitude. And I remember going home after sacking myself, and we'd already sacked most of our staff. We were down to a skeleton team trying to survive. And I just went home and I turned on the cold tap. And I watched it run for a few minutes, because it's an amazing thing to have cold, clean, running water that you can just drink from a tap. Some people don't have that. In fact, 9/10 of the world don't live this incredible, privileged life that we have. So be grateful every day, and especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to have the attitude of gratitude, because every day is a blessing. I went back to consulting. It wasn't the end of the world. I didn't die. I didn't lose my house in the end, thankfully, and whilst I did lose a lot of money, I was still able to go back and consult, which is not something I particularly enjoyed, but it was able to help me claw back some of my losses. And I started writing again. I'd already got, I'd approached an agent back in 1999 with this novella that I thought was a novel. I went, and she was Ian Banks' agent, in fact, and she loved it and said, come and talk about your writing career. And I put my writing career on hold in order to become an entrepreneur. That's one thing that I think was a mistake. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd continued trying to do both, because I don't regret, but I think it would have been better for me had I managed to have a bit more of a work-life balance. You know, I'd urge you to have a work-life balance. Don't give up everything, because it's not healthy. Getting back on the horse, some horses are easier to climb onto than others, and as a software developer, if you code, you don't need millions to start a software company. So you do need a lot of money to start a hardware company, because especially the sort of big hardware that we were building. So I love languages. I speak 5 languages to varying degrees of incompetency, and I wanted to find ways to help people learn a language, but I wasn't ready to go out and ask for money again. So someone that I met, I was learning Portuguese at the time, and I got my Portuguese teacher to help out, and we started just sending out daily emails that were like a diary format to help you just get a little bit of exposure to a language every day. So it was a word of the day and a phrase, just wanting to see if it would grow. By 2008, actually 2007, I had a real meltdown. So I was fine in 2004, but after 2 years, I started to feel like a failure. I was 37, coming up to 40. It's a big time to, as a person, anyone, I think, coming up to that number starts to get afraid of it. And I felt like I was a failure. So I went back to do some personal development and started to reframe my experiences as a success, which is how I view it now. You know, those experiences were amazing. I'm very proud of what we achieved as a team. We changed the world a little bit, you know, even if it didn't continue to be available as a product. And I started thinking, okay, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur again, bite-sized languages is great, but it's not going to make us money. It didn't go viral. People like it, but it was growing slowly. So I started thinking, how do I solve the problem of learning languages? You know, and that's, you know, creative thinking that turns me on as an entrepreneur. That's what drives me. I've also been writing The Looking Glass Club, which I don't know if you know, but that's my first novel that I published. And I started working on a prototype just privately. It wasn't publicly available to anyone, just to test this new idea that I had, which I called test-driven learning. So the idea is, actually I'll go into it in a little bit more in a moment. And then we bootstrapped our way to last year. Eventually, the brain mapped prototype became a fully fledged technology. My business partner's brilliant at doing things that I don't like doing. He's patient and creates robust industry strength web systems, whereas I create scrappy prototypes that I pull together that are fun and prove a concept. And of course I do all the back-end data architecture stuff. So together we work really well, and we created Quizzic, which is test-driven learning. So the idea here, and I'll run through these very quickly, is, you know, people are lied to about how long it... Who speaks a second language? It's how, you look like a... I thought you might do it. So you know how hard it is to learn a second language. It takes a long time. But all the books say, oh, you know, learn French in 3 weeks, or, you know, 10 hours to learn Portuguese. And it doesn't work. You need a long time. And I say it's like climbing a mountain. Most people... Now, if you join a course and you stick with it through those 600 hours, that's a guided journey. But most people don't do that. They do a week here, or they buy a tutor, or they go on a holiday, or they use the web. And most people get lost. They go off piste. So Quizzic is like a GPS for the language learning journey. It's smart. It learns where the student is using a test-driven paradigm. So that's not possible if you're writing a course for other people. So what we do is using test-driven. So everything you do with Quizzic is every interaction measures your language skills. So we had to design an entire taxonomy to break down languages in a way that we could work out what the smallest atom of a testable unit of a language is. That was about 18 months of hard thinking, part-time as it was. So we bootstrapped our way to, and we're raising money this year. We've gone back. I'm confident now we have a product. But notice, I didn't go out and raise money for this idea. I'm only doing it now. Could have done it quicker. I probably should have gotten on that horse a little bit sooner and maybe been a bit more ambitious, but I was doing other things. Now, a few years ago, a chap called Eric Rees created something called... Who's heard of Lean Startup? Just to get an idea. Read this book if you're going to set up a business. In fact, read it anyway. It's really interesting. I should be promoting my own book, but I'm going to promote Eric's. It teaches how to do business the scientific way, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. What is Lean? Lean is, I mean, it could be called a scientific startup, but that might put people off. Lean is a way of doing business that is business hypothesis-driven experimentation. So it's how do you experiment your way to a successful company. And there are some mantras that need really, it's worth reading around these mantras because it's very easy to get them wrong. So one of them is launch early, fail fast. Failing fast can be misunderstood, and some people get quite cross with that, but I can tell you, as someone who failed slowly, fail fast. You know, it doesn't really mean fail. You're playing a game in life, and failing is just getting tackled. So you want to work out what's going to tackle you as early as possible, and then reinvent yourself to mitigate that. And you want to learn that stuff as soon as possible. So that means launching products that aren't ready yet. Minimum viable product is the term for something that's just good enough to start going to market and saying to users, do you like this? You don't even have to sell it. Dropbox was launched with, I think, a video presentation. It didn't even work. It wasn't a technology. You use data to design both your product and to make better financial models. So instead of fantasizing about the fitness market, we could have actually gone with our prototype that we built in the first 3 months, repackaged it in a way. We were using a bicycle, something called a TACX resistance machine, and then some code and a computer. We could have just repackaged that and tried to sell that. It was great, it would have worked. You know, that would have been the right way to go to market, and then we could have made a better product over time, iterating it. We didn't need millions and millions of investment in the end. If your iteration isn't working, then you pivot. So what that means, Instagram's a wonderful example of this. I'm not going to go into their history entirely, but Instagram wasn't originally about photo sharing. It was some game and Foursquare melange that ended up, and they built it in 8 weeks, and then said, that's not working, we want to do photo sharing. So they recoded the app, and then it just went completely crazy. They totally changed what they were doing based on feedback from the market. You don't have to pivot. If you're doing, if you're doing things in a way that's working and you iterate, then you don't have to pivot. It's just if the things aren't working. So this isn't about. So failing isn't really about failing. It's about giving you the opportunity to pivot before you run out of cash. So Lean really is about, and this is actually a tweet from the Lean website. The goal of a Lean startup is to move through the build, measure, learn feedback loop as quickly as possible. And for me. So here's some real data. We launched French Test. So we built Quizzic. We weren't really being lean. We built, again, an overblown technology that between Simon and I as coders was coded, I think, almost 1 million lines of code in different things over 4 years. And then we cut back. We got some external advice. We both read the Lean book and thought, oh, why am I not doing business a scientific way? This makes complete sense. And Simon agreed completely. So we suddenly started being lean. We repackaged Quizzic in a cut-down version, minimum viable product. We tested the market to see who would buy reports about their linguistic proficiency for £1 or £5, with slightly different features. 5% of our users bought them at that pricing. We then launched in December, so just last month. We launched a subscription service which actually does the Quizzic goal of finding out where you are and then helping you move towards fluency by using test-driven technology to improve your grammar. And we found that 1.8% of our active users would subscribe at £10 a month. Now that's probably twice the price of our competitors. They don't do what we do, but that's, and I've heard anecdotally that they don't get anywhere near these conversion rates. So we're delighted by this, and we know we can move towards 3%, 5%. This is a minimum viable product, and we're already getting that. So what can I do with that data? I can now go back and revise models that I'd already built, but parameterized my conversion rates. I know the size of the addressable market. I've done a lot of research on that. And I can make models that are less wrong. And that's what science is about. This is a physicist anyway. I mean, not all science is the same, but as a physicist, it's not about truth. We will never get to the truth, not with our little 3-pound brains. The universe is enormous. We couldn't possibly know how it really works. So the goal is to create models that increasingly are more precise. They make better predictions about the world, and that's exactly what science business is about. It's about data-driven business. Better models, better predictions, lower financial risk. You know, it means you can start making a profit, even a small profit, at a much earlier stage in your business. So actually, your training as a scientist is ideal for you as an entrepreneur. You know about data, you know about science and experimentation. And I'd forgotten that, I think, or I got misled thinking you had to have an MBA to know how to do business. And you know, MBAs are great. I highly recommend going and doing one of those as well if you want to. But really, you know, you do have a great training already as a scientist, or an engineer. So to be an entrepreneur, you have to have passion. I think passion is really important, because when times get tricky, it's your passion that keeps you going. But I've seen a lot of debates on the difference between cultivating passion and following passion. I would say follow your passion, but actually you can cultivate a passion as well. If you don't have a passion, or you haven't found it yet, then you can get passionate about something by finding out what it is about that thing that turns you on. You don't have to be creative, you don't have to invent your own things. That's what turns me on, but I know lots of successful businesses that actually just like being an entrepreneur, or they like one French entrepreneur that I know. For me, is a little bit like stealing, but he takes models .coms that work in English or in some other market, and then makes it basically the same product in a different language. So he targets an entire other language and recreates something that he's seen working. You know, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not really stealing, but you know, it's not, for me, it wouldn't turn me on because it's not my idea. It's not creative. Do get experience. Go and work. You know, I had staff that worked. I didn't stay very long at Anderson's, but actually it was good training. I didn't like it, probably because I was immature. You know, if I admit that I wasn't mature enough to enjoy that in culture. Going from complete freedom as a research student down to big companies work differently. You have to toe the line, and I'm a little bit rebellious, so that didn't work for me. You can work for a startup though if you want to join a startup. If you want to leave research, joining a startup is a great experience. It doesn't matter whether it succeeds or fails. I mean, ideally it would succeed, but learning from failure is as important, if not more important, than learning from your successes. Because when things go right, you don't know if they went right because you were lucky, or they went right because you did things correctly. But when things go wrong, you can analyse why they went wrong. So do learn, do get experience, do personal development. And do as much as you can. You know, it's go out there, find out what I learned from personal development was I dealt with some of my own baggage. You know, I let go of that, but I also got the freedom from that to take bigger risks and grow into a bigger person. And stop floating. I started making active choices about what I wanted to do with my life, and that's very empowering to do. You know, hang around people who inspire you as well. It's you're surrounded by them at Imperial. You're kind of bound to be. Be prepared to fail. How do you prepare to fail? Honestly, personal development is the only thing I think you can do to prepare for that. Nothing prepares you to lose £5 million. You know, the Boo founder. Who remembers Boo? Back in the day, 2 people. I won't tell that story then. And use science. You know, use your training. Be lean to mitigate risk. Science for me is about training yourself not to believe what you want to be true. You know, humans love patterns. We see patterns even when there are no patterns. And as a scientist, if you've done statistics training, which I'm sure most of you have, if not all of you, then the worst person that can fool you is yourself. And I fooled myself creating 5 models. You know, drag and copy in Excel is the worst thing you can get, especially when you've got compound interest happening. You know, if you've got some of those cells, say, you know, times 1.005, eventually that adds up to huge numbers, and it's, you know, you mustn't buy your own hype. Failing is just getting tackled, like I said. At the end of the day, you have to get back up and play on. It's a game, you know. Even if I'd lost my house, even if I'd lost everything, there are people who've had much worse experiences, and the only thing that you can do that's going to make you feel good again is to get back up and ride the horse again, or I'm mixing my metaphors horribly here, play the game again. That's it. So, thank you for listening.